Imagine pouring yourself like a single glass of red wine, right? You take a sip, and within maybe 20 minutes, your heart is just racing.
Yeah, out of nowhere.
Exactly. Your chest is suddenly covered in these mystery hives, and this blinding migraine just sets in, and you're sitting there thinking, wait, have I developed a sudden wine allergy?
Which is terrifying.
It is,
Yeah,
but you haven't. What's actually happened is that your body has fundamentally forgotten how to process a chemical that you've been eating your entire life.
right. And it is an incredibly disorienting experience. And the crazy part is, it's happening to a massive number of women in their 40s and 50s who suddenly feel like they've become, well, allergic to their own lives.
Yeah, allergic to their own lives is the perfect way to put it. So if that sounds familiar to you, or, if you're watching a friend or a partner go through this totally maddening experience, you're absolutely in the right place. Because today's deep dive is tackling this biological mystery that is, thankfully, finally hitting the mainstream. We are unpacking exactly how the hormonal shifts of perimenopause and menopause can completely break your body's ability to process histamine.
Which leads to this sudden severe histamine intolerance.
Right. And based on the sources we've pulled for this, it's really a detective story. It's about how your hormones, your digestive tract, and your immune system are like constantly having these secret back-channel conversations.
Yeah, and more importantly, what happens when those conversations turn into a physiological shouting match?
A shouting match, exactly. So to understand why menopause causes this chemical chaos, we actually have to unlearn almost everything we think we know about histamine.
Oh, completely.
Because when most of us hear the word histamine, we immediately picture, sneezing, itchy eyes, springtime pollen.
Yeah, basically the stuff you take a little pink allergy pill for.
Exactly. But looking at the literature, histamine is so much more than just an allergy chemical. It is actually a crucial neurotransmitter.
It really is.
It regulates your stomach acid, it controls your sleep-wake cycles, and this one blew my mind. It even plays a major role in your sex drive.
Yeah, people are always shocked by that. You definitely don't want zero histamine in your body. I mean, you need it to survive.
Right.
In the body, it is primarily produced and stored in these immune cells called mast cells.
Mast cells, right.
Yeah, so think of mast cells as like your immune system's border patrol agents. They are stationed at all the crucial entry points. So your skin, your gut lining, your respiratory tract, your blood vessels.
Okay, so they're standing guard.
Exactly. And when they sense a threat, they basically burst open and release histamine to create inflammation, which, is a localized response meant to protect you.
Right, to isolate the threat.
Right. But the thing is, we also absorb massive amounts of histamine from the outside, specifically from the foods we eat.
Okay, so we have this highly active internal factory producing histamine, plus a steady stream coming in from our diet every single day. Honestly, that sounds like a recipe for a toxic buildup if there isn't some way to clear it out constantly.
Which is exactly why the body has this highly regulated dual-action cleanup crew. The main player here is an enzyme called diamine oxidase.
Or DAO, right? We saw that acronym a lot in the research.
Yeah, DAO. So DAO lives primarily in your gut, and its entire job is to break down the histamine from your food before it can even enter your bloodstream and, overwhelm your system.
Got it.
And then you have a second enzyme called HNMT. If DAO is like the bouncer at the door of the club handling the food, HNMT is the internal air purifier inside your actual cells.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, it breaks down the histamine that is created internally by those mast cells we talked about.
Okay, so the easiest way I've found to visualize this whole capacity issue, based on what the experts are saying, is to think of your body as a bucket.
The histamine bucket analogy, yes, so helpful.
It really is. So that bucket represents your total capacity to handle histamine, right? And from the top, histamine is constantly pouring in from your food, from your environment, and from your own immune system.
Right, it's flowing in.
But down at the bottom of the bucket, you have a drain. And that drain is the DAO enzyme. So as long as the drain is open and working efficiently, the water flows in, it flows out, and the bucket never overflows.
Exactly. And histamine intolerance is simply a mechanical failure of that exact bucket.
Okay.
If your DAO drain gets clogged, or if the bucket itself suddenly shrinks, it just can't keep up with what's pouring in, so the bucket overflows.
And when it overflows, the histamine spills over into your bloodstream, right? And it binds to receptors all over your body,
causing a massive systemic inflammatory response. That overflow is what triggers the sudden migraines, the hives, the racing heart.
Wow.
You aren't actually reacting to one specific allergen anymore. You are dealing with a severe capacity issue.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so we've established the plumbing, but why does this bucket suddenly start violently overflowing for women, specifically during perimenopause?
Ah, this is where it gets fascinating.
Yeah, because this brings us to that absolutely wild, intricate dance between histamine and female sex hormones.
Right, so let's look at the two main female hormones, estrogen and progesterone. In the context of our bucket analogy, estrogen is the gas pedal and progesterone is the brake pedal.
Okay, gas and brakes.
Yeah. So estrogen actively stimulates your mast cells. It binds to them and chemically tells them, hey, release more histamine into the bucket.
Wow, okay, so it's literally turning up the faucet.
Exactly.
But if estrogen is the gas pedal flooding the system, there has to be a counterbalance, right? Like, is that where progesterone comes in, or are we just relying entirely on the DAO drain to save us?
Though you're spot on. Progesterone is the vital counterbalance. It acts as the brake pedal. It literally calms and stabilizes the membranes of those mast cells so they become less reactive.
Okay, so they don't just dump as much histamine at the slightest provocation.
Right. And furthermore, progesterone actually supports the activity of the DAO enzyme. It actively helps keep the drain open. So in a healthy, regular menstrual cycle, estrogen and progesterone constantly keep each other in check.
But perimenopause is pretty much defined by the loss of that balance. It's not just a slow, gentle decline of hormones, right? It's a total roller coaster.
It's chaotic.
And this is where the mechanism gets truly terrifying, honestly, because the sources point out there's a vicious feedback loop here. Estrogen creates more histamine, and this is the wild part, histamine somehow stimulates the ovaries to produce even more estrogen.
Yes.
How does a gut and immune chemical boss around the reproductive system like that?
It all comes down to receptors. You see, histamine receptors aren't just located in your sinuses or your skin. They're physically present on your ovaries.
Wait, really?
Yes. So when the bucket overflows, that excess histamine travels through the bloodstream, binds directly to the ovaries, and chemically forces them to pump out more estrogen.
Oh my God.
And here is where estrogen deals its final blow. At high levels, estrogen actively downregulates or inhibits that DAO enzyme in your gut.
Unbelievable. So estrogen is stepping on the gas pedal to release more histamine, physically traveling to the ovaries to demand even more estrogen, and it's simultaneously cementing the DAO drain shut.
It is a totally self-perpetuating cycle. And the timing of midlife is the spark that ignites it. Because during perimenopause, progesterone levels usually drop off first.
Right, your brake pedal disappears.
Exactly. But your ovaries are still sputtering, right? They're often producing these massive, erratic, unopposed spikes of estrogen.
So you have maximum gas pedal, no brakes, a clogged drain, and a faucet on full blast.
Yeah, the histamine bucket doesn't just overflow, it violently spills over.
And because estrogen and histamine are locked in this chaotic loop, the body just goes into absolute overdrive. But the symptoms that result from this overflowing bucket are, like, incredibly deceptive.
Oh, they're the ultimate mimic.
Yeah, because if you look at the list of histamine intolerant symptoms side by side with standard menopause symptoms, they are basically the exact same list.
They really are, which is why so many women are just slipping through the cracks of the medical system. Let's actually break down the physical mechanics of that.
Let's do it.
So when histamine overflows, it acts as a powerful vasodilator. It actively widens your blood vessels, which causes a sudden rush of heat and redness to the skin.
Okay, and to the woman experiencing it and to her doctor, what does that look like?
It looks exactly like a textbook menopausal hot flash.
Right, and it doesn't stop there. According to the research, histamine regulates the hypothalamus, which controls your body's internal thermostat. So a chemical overflow triggers intense, drenching night sweats. And because it acts as an excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain, it promotes extreme wakefulness.
Yeah, it keeps you alert.
So when your brain is flooded with it, you experience severe insomnia, crippling anxiety, brain fog. Your brain is literally chemically wired, unable to power down.
Which has to take a massive psychological toll. I mean, I can't even imagine the frustration of dealing with this day in and day out.
Oh, completely. And you go to your doctor, and because this overflow affects multiple organ systems simultaneously, you end up getting chopped into pieces by different specialists.
Yeah, that is the tragic reality of how siloed modern medicine can be. We treat the individual symptoms without ever looking for the unifying root cause.
Right, so the dermatologist sees the hives and prescribes a steroid cream. The gastroenterologist sees the severe bloating and diarrhea and labels it irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah.
The cardiologist checks your racing heart and palpitations, runs an EKG, and says, well, your heart is fundamentally fine. And then the general practitioner sees the anxiety and the brain fog and just writes a prescription for antidepressants.
It's a nightmare.
And through all of this, the patient is left sitting in her car after these appointments, feeling completely defeated, probably starting to believe she's a hypochondriac.
Medical gaslighting is incredibly common here
Mm.
because standard allergy tests, like the scratch tests for pollen or peanuts, they look for an antibody called IgE.
Okay.
But histamine intolerance doesn't trigger IgE, so those tests come back completely negative.
Oh, wow. So you leave the allergist with a clean bill of health while feeling physically awful.
Exactly. If a doctor doesn't know to look at the estrogen-histamine connection, they will never solve the puzzle. They just keep putting these tiny band-aids on a broken pipe while the patient continues to suffer.
It's so frustrating. But okay, if hormones are shrinking the bucket and cementing the DAO drain shut, you really need to know what is pouring in from the top to try and control it.
Absolutely.
And we hear the phrase dietary triggers and immediately assume, oh, I need to cut out junk food or processed sugar. But looking at the sources, the things pouring histamine into your bucket are often the exact things we do to stay healthy.
It is the ultimate irony of the midlife wellness diet.
It really is. Like, if you decide to eat a super healthy, anti-aging, menopause-friendly diet, let's say you make a beautiful spinach, avocado, and tomato salad, followed by some gut-friendly probiotic kombucha and a piece of leftover salmon.
Oh boy.
Yeah, you are basically dropping a histamine bomb on your system.
You really are.
And I get why a rotting piece of meat might have bacteria, but why on earth do leftovers trigger a histamine response? Like, that salmon was fresh yesterday.
I know, it sounds crazy, but it all comes down to bacteria and the aging process.
Yeah.
Histamine in food isn't an added chemical preservative. It is naturally generated by bacterial fermentation and the breakdown of proteins.
Okay.
As soon as you cook a piece of meat and put it in the fridge, the natural, perfectly safe bacteria on that food begin to break down the proteins, specifically targeting an amino acid called histidine.
Histidine, right.
And as they break it down, they convert it directly into histamine. So a piece of chicken that is virtually histamine-free on Monday night is absolutely swimming in histamine by Wednesday lunchtime.
Wow.
For someone with a clogged DAO drain, eating those leftovers is enough to cause a massive symptom flare.
Okay, so fermentation and aging are the culprits. That explains why aged cheeses like cheddar and Parmesan, cured meats like salami, and fermented foods like sauerkraut, yogurt, and kombucha are off the table.
Exactly.
But what about the spinach, tomatoes, and avocados in that healthy salad? I mean, there is no bacteria fermenting a fresh spinach leaf, so what is the biological mechanism there?
Right, so those fall into a slightly different category called histamine liberators.
Liberators.
Yeah. They might not necessarily be high in histamine themselves, but they contain specific chemical compounds that act like little pins popping a balloon.
Oh, interesting.
When they hit your digestive system, they trigger your mast cells to violently dump the histamine they're already storing internally. Citrus fruits and strawberries do this as well.
That is so unfair. But okay, we have to tackle alcohol, specifically wine. Because we've all heard women joke about developing a sudden allergy to wine in their 40s.
Yeah, alcohol is a brutal double whammy for this condition. First, wine, especially red wine, is fermented and aged, so it's naturally very high in histamine to begin with.
Right.
But second, and more importantly, alcohol actively blocks the DAO enzyme in your gut from functioning.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. So
Right.
you are pouring a massive amount of histamine into the bucket, and you are simultaneously putting a cork in the drain.
Wow. This is why a single glass of wine now results in a severe migraine, facial flushing, or a racing heart at 3 in the morning.
Exactly. It's not a bad hangover, it's an acute, systemic histamine response.
That makes so much sense. And I'm assuming psychological stress plays a role here too, right? Like our bodies aren't just reacting to food.
Oh, stress is a massive physiological trigger. When you are stressed, your body releases the hormone cortisol.
Right, the stress hormone.
Right. And cortisol directly binds to mast cells and destabilizes them, causing them to degranulate and release histamine.
So if you are stressing over your bizarre physical symptoms, and then not sleeping because the histamine is keeping your brain wired, and then stressing about not sleeping.
Exactly. You are filling the bucket with stress-induced histamine on top of the food and the erratic estrogen spikes. It's a perfect storm.
Okay, so we have thoroughly diagnosed the problem. The plumbing is broken, the bucket is overflowing, the healthy foods are sabotaging us, and stress is making it all worse.
It sounds pretty bleak when you say it like that.
It does. So how does a person actually take back control and fix the plumbing?
Well, because we understand the mechanics of the bucket, there are actually very clear, actionable management strategies.
Okay, good.
It requires a multi-pronged approach targeting diet, supplements, medications, and ultimately hormonal stabilization. The first step is usually a temporary low histamine elimination diet.
The key word there being temporary. Like, this isn't a life sentence of eating plain white rice forever.
Definitely not. The goal is to strictly reduce high histamine foods for about 2 to 4 weeks. You're basically trying to empty the bucket completely so your baseline symptoms calm down and the inflammation subsides.
Got it.
And once the bucket is empty, you systematically reintroduce foods one by one to find your personal tolerance threshold.
Okay, so you test the waters.
Right. A bad reintroduction will be really obvious. You eat a piece of aged cheese, and within an hour, the severe bloating or the brain fog returns. You might find you can handle a fresh avocado, but a glass of red wine destroys you. Everyone's threshold is completely unique.
That makes sense. And while you're emptying the bucket, you can actively try to unclog the drain. I saw in the research that vitamin C and vitamin B6 are really crucial here.
Yes, because the DAO enzyme needs specific cofactors to work properly. Vitamin C and B6 essentially act as fuel for the enzyme. Ensuring you have enough of those helps DAO function at its absolute peak.
Oh, nice.
You can also take over-the-counter DAO enzyme supplements directly.
Wait, really? You can just take the enzyme?
Yeah. You take them about 15 minutes before a meal, and they just sit in your gut, waiting to break down the histamine in the food you're about to eat. It's essentially like buying a temporary secondary drain for your bucket.
That is amazing. And for the mast cells themselves, there's quercetin, right?
Yes.
It's a natural plant flavonoid found in onions and apples. The sources say it acts as a natural mast cell stabilizer, essentially telling those hyperactive immune cells to calm down and hold on to their histamine rather than just releasing it into your bloodstream.
Exactly.
But what if natural supplements aren't enough? Because there is an emerging trend of mixing over-the-counter allergy meds that totally fascinated me.
The H1 and H2 blockers.
Yeah. Taking a daily antihistamine like Allegra or Claritin makes sense to me, but doctors are pairing it with Pepcid, the acid reflux pill. How does an antacid help with histamine?
Right. So this is a protocol often used by immunologists for chronic issues. Remember how there are different types of histamine receptors scattered throughout the body? Well, H1 receptors are mostly in the skin, the brain, and the airways.
Okay.
But H2 receptors are concentrated in the gut lining and the stomach. Pepcid is actually an H2 blocker. It blocks histamine from binding in the stomach.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. So by taking an H1 blocker like Allegra and an H2 blocker like Pepcid, you are effectively putting earmuffs on the receptors all over your body.
I love the earmuffs analogy, but that's really just a symptom management tool, isn't it? Like, you're putting earmuffs on the receptors, but the bucket is still overflowing, the water is still spilling onto the floor, you just can't hear it splashing.
That is a brilliant way to contextualize it.
Yeah.
Yes, it masks the noise, and that's why diet and hormones have to be addressed to actually stop the leak at the source.
Which brings me to a massive, glaring question about the ultimate fix.
Let's hear it.
If we know that estrogen is the gas pedal for this whole nightmare, wouldn't taking hormone replacement therapy, HRT, make everything exponentially worse?
It's a great question.
Right, because if a woman is already sitting there with hives and heart palpitations from estrogen spikes, how is any doctor going to comfortably prescribe her an estrogen patch? Doesn't that risk just throwing gasoline on the fire and sending her to the ER?
That is the most crucial, nuanced question in this entire topic, and you're absolutely right to challenge it. And to be clear, based on the clinical consensus we were looking at, if a doctor prescribes a standard high-dose oral estrogen pill to a woman in this state, it absolutely can cause a massive, unbearable symptom flare.
Okay, so it is a real risk.
It is. But the root cause of this histamine intolerance isn't just the mere presence of estrogen. It is the chaotic, erratic spikes and the severe lack of opposing progesterone.
Okay, so the goal of HRT in this specific scenario isn't just to blindly pump the body full of hormones, but to forcibly stop the roller coaster?
Precisely. It's the opposite of throwing gasoline on the fire. Over the long term, stabilizing the hormonal environment is the ultimate cure for the plumbing.
Okay, so how do they do it safely?
The clinical consensus dictates starting incredibly low and slow. Using transdermal estrogen like a patch or a gel that absorbs through the skin provides a steady, constant microdose.
Oh, so it avoids the liver and those massive spikes?
Exactly. It bypasses the liver and prevents those erratic spikes that trigger the mast cells to dump histamine. And crucially, you absolutely must pair it with a generous dose of micronized progesterone,
The brake pedal.
the essential brake pedal. The body-identical micronized progesterone will actively calm the mast cells down and physically support that DAO enzyme.
Wow.
By carefully stabilizing the environment and restoring that braking mechanism, HRT actually stops the chaotic hormonal loop that triggered the histamine bucket to overflow in the first place.
That is incredibly empowering. So if you've been sitting there listening to this, feeling like your body has betrayed you, or feeling like you are suddenly allergic to the life you've always lived, you are not crazy.
You really aren't.
You aren't making it up. You are experiencing a highly specific, very real, and highly treatable chemical mismatch driven by this wild estrogen-histamine loop.
You are just operating with a shrinking bucket and a clogged drain. But once you understand the mechanical failures, you can repair them.
Exactly. So here is your action plan. If these cyclical, multi-system, bizarrely overlapping symptoms sound familiar to you, don't just accept them as some mysterious midlife curse.
No, definitely not.
Start tracking them. Track your symptoms against your menstrual cycle or, where your cycle used to be and against the foods you eat. And when you go to a knowledgeable healthcare provider, whether that's a menopause specialist or a registered dietitian, bring that specific data with you.
Yes, data is everything.
Bring up the exact term histamine intolerance. Advocate for yourself using the biological facts we talked about today.
Knowledge really is power here, because the more precise you can be about the pattern, the faster you can escape the cycle of misdiagnosis and actually get to the right treatment.
Well said. Which leaves us with one final lingering thought for you to chew on today. For generations, women have been told that the bizarre, sprawling, life-altering symptoms of midlife were just, part of getting older or worse, that they are all in their head.
We hear that far too often.
We really do. But now that we can literally trace the complex biological dots between estrogen, mast cells, and a piece of leftover salmon, how many other mysteries of women's health are completely solvable, just waiting for us to finally look at the whole picture?